Today we're going to look at First Thessalonians chapter 2. And this passage has tons of application for anybody who's in full-time Christian service or just people who want to share the gospel and have it effective. He starts out in verse 1 and he tells you how not to waste your life in Christian service, or that your evangelistic efforts, if you're just a layperson, no, I shouldn't say just layperson, because actually lay people are the ones who are supposed to be equipped to get the gospel out to the world. But if you're a layperson, how to do that in a way that doesn't fail. Verse 1, you know, brothers, that our visit to you was not a failure. That's, unfortunately, a lot of Christian service. It's a failure. So if you're in full-time Christian service, here's how not to fail. Verse 2, we had previously suffered and been insulted in Philippi. Number 1, forget the past. Sure, you got mistreated in the past. We all did. We all have. People have rejected your evangelistic efforts or your love or whatever. Forget about it and move on. Enough said. Okay, and you know that in Philippi, as you know, but with the help of God, we dared to tell you the gospel in spite of strong opposition. Okay, secondly, you're going to get opposition today. That doesn't mean that God's against you. Just because people come against you in your full-time Christian service or in your evangelistic efforts doesn't mean that God's against you, or that, well, it must not be God's will. That's baloney. Come on. Just because it's happening, it happened again. It happened in Philippi. They moved on to Thessalonica, and it happened again. But they said, you know what? That doesn't mean anything. We're still going to dare to tell the gospel. So move on. Press on. Let's move on. Verse 3. For the appeal we make does not spring from impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. Two things here. Why are you doing what you're doing? What's your purpose in being in full-time Christian service? Is it a job? If it's a job for you, please go find another job, because you're that close to embarrassing God and yourself and people who love you and respected you. This is not a job. So if your motive is just to make a living off of this, wrong. It's a bad way to make a living. What's your motive? Even if it's just evangelism, and you're not in full-time service, but you're trying to get another notch in your belt, or you're trying to get the pastor to look at you like, ooh, really a amazing Christian guy or girl or whatever. Don't. Look at your motives, okay? Nor are we trying to trick you. Now, a lot of evangelism happens in a really tricky way, and so does full-time Christian service. You can give an invitation in church and have the music going just right and have everyone doing the right things to get people to walk down the aisle. That is not God's plan, to trick people down the aisle. You don't trick anyone into heaven. And that may be your deep down motive, is that they get saved, but you can't trick people. And I've heard all kinds of unbelievable stories of trickery when it came to evangelism. You knock on the door, they open the door a little bit, and people would stick their foot in the door. Why? Because that way, if they reject the gospel, you can toss the little gospel tract in the crack in the door, then pull your foot out. You know, these and other methodologies of trickery have got to go. That's not how you have an effective ministry. Verse 4, on the contrary, we speak as men approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, not trying to please men, but God. Who are you trying to please? Why are you doing what you're doing? Back to your motives. If you care what people think about you, I'm not talking about not trying to offend people. You don't want to try to offend people. And I'm not talking about having a ministry where you're like, I don't care who I offend. No, don't do that. But if you're ultimately trying to make them happy and like you, it's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. God, when you're talking to people about God, you got to ultimately be thinking, whether you're preaching or whether you're just evangelizing, you got to ultimately think, I hope that I'm making God the happiest by what I'm doing right now. Got to be thinking that. Verse 5. You know we never used flattery, nor did we put a mask to cover up greed. Okay. Flattery is something that's got to go. And a lot of preaching, if you turn the TBN on or those shows, it's all about how great, you are and just unleash your potential. And, nice words. It's great if you're, into Tony Robbins. And there's nothing wrong with it morally, but it isn't the gospel. And if you want people to be saved, you've got to give them the gospel, okay? And so you just don't want to go out and flatter people like, oh, I want to make you feel good today. That's not what this is about. Now, I'm going to go back on that a little bit. You're going to think I am, but I'm really not. But it's not about flattering people and saying how great they are. He says also, oh, he didn't use a mask to cover up greed. What mask do sometimes full-time Christian people put on? Here's the mask. I'm so poor. If I could just afford a gallon of gas, I would just do this. And then people give them more money. Come on. Be real. Don't do that. Don't feign poverty to get more money out of people. That's what happens. God's your witness. Verse 6. For we were not looking for praise from men nor from anyone else. We got to move on because we only have about 3 minutes left. Verse 7. We were gentle among you like a mother cares for her kids. He's going to say, be gentle like a mother, and then in verse 11, he's going to say, act like a father, encouraging and urging. You need to be gentle like a mother would be gentle. When you're a child and you fall, you go for your mom. That is how we've got to be in full-time service. Look, the flock, they've been beaten up and bruised. Now, while we're not going to use flattery, because flattery is really a bunch of lies usually, you want to be comforting to them. And then a father. What's a father do? Encouraging and comforting, urging them to live lives. It's not, you failed again, didn't you? I know you failed. That's not what we're going for. We're going for, come on, let's get up and let's make a difference for God today. How are you going to be? Your attitude and your personality with people has got to be like a mother and a father who loves their kids so much you'd do anything for them. That was also verse 11. One more verse to look at in here. Verse 10, real important. You are witnesses, and so is God, how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. Now, he talks about different words there, and actually they sort of mean different things. But let's just say, suffice it to say, your life has to back up what you're saying. It's got to back up the gospel. And if it doesn't, you're doing what you're doing in vain. Whether it's your full-time Christian service or your evangelism or whatever efforts you're making for God, you've got to live the life. Now, because he did all of those things, look at what he says in verse 13. And we thank God continually because when you received the word of God, which you heard from us, you accepted it not as the word of men, but actually as it is in truth the word of God. Why did they receive it? Because of all those things that he had done before. He worked day and night among them. He cared about them. All his concern was for them. And because of that, they received it. Are your words failing? Are they falling on deaf ears? If so, take a good look at this passage and say, maybe I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I gave up a long time ago when I got, insulted by somebody and I stopped really living it. Maybe I'm not acting like a mother and a father loving these people. Take a look at your ministry. Is it working? Are they receiving the word of God or are they not? I hope you'll read this whole passage and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless you and have a great day.